The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Good evening and welcome into my State of Mind. I am Dan York. We're going to get right to it tonight. Parents are very concerned about safety with their children always, but certainly with the friction over whether to get into school or not, they have a lot to say. We're going to talk to two parents tonight who have a point of view and who have joined an organic social media group to make it. Here's the story that Eyewitness News put together earlier this week.
Safe return to schools, Rhode Island!
We just heard from parents, teachers, and community leaders who say they just want to be heard by state leaders. They believe kids cannot go back into school until it's safe to do so. They support starting at least the school year with full distance learning for safety.
I will not be sending my son to school like 1 day, 2 days, like I don't care. That's risk, right?
The people who organized this rally were supported by people driving by and honking. One of the women behind this, a fourth grade teacher in Central Falls.
It would be prudent to err on the side of caution and that there is no award to be won for being the state that heads back first.
She says everyone can agree. People want to get back into the classroom. However, she strongly believes a full distance learning plan is the only safe way to return this fall.
We just want it to be acknowledged that places that like Central Falls and Providence and Warwick that don't have the money to return to school safely shouldn't have to. And it's not that teachers aren't working hard enough or school leaders aren't working hard enough. It's just that they logistically and fiscally cannot return to school right now.
And so on your screen are two people who are very concerned about the safety issues along the school line. Of course, there's nobody that's not concerned about it. The question is, what's the best way to get this done? You saw in our piece, Stephanie Meuse, who happens to be a fourth grade elementary teacher in one of the charter schools in Central Falls and a parent in East Providence, and Ashley Breault on the top left, who is a parent in Central Falls. Both have joined this Facebook social media organically grown group known as Rhode Island Parents and Educators for Safe Schools. And they've got a page that says Safe Return to Schools. Thank you both for coming. I appreciate you joining me. Ashley, on the on top left, tell me what your background is and why you're involved in this this ad hoc group.
Well, my children's education are why I'm involved in the group, and I believe that every child deserves an education to the best of their ability. Unfortunately, I don't believe it's safe to be in schools at this time, and for them that they're not going to get the best education that they can get with all the new restrictions that are going to be in place. It's been very hard with this pandemic, but my number one concern right now is the children and their safety and how they're going to get their education is why I joined the group.
In other words, you're a mom. Yeah,
I am a mom of two. I'm a mom of two. I have a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old, a boy and a girl.
Yeah, but what you just expressed, and folks, forgive sometimes the Zoom technology doesn't cooperate. I know her audio is a little bit choppy, but we'll see how it goes over the course of the broadcast. And if we have to let Ashley go early, we'll try to get some of her points through here. But my reaction to your answer is, okay, you're a mom. You want your kids to be safe. You want your kids to be educated. Now the question is, what is the right thing to do? And Stephanie, as both, I'm guessing you're a mom too, correct?
I am. Yep, I'm a mom of twin girls in East Providence, and I teach fourth grade at the Learning Community in Central Falls. So
you've got both ends of the spectrum covered there, and the truth is, lots of our teachers are moms and dads, and so it's not a foreign concept. You started this group. Why?
So we started this group because lots of different people were having conversations with either their colleagues or their parent friends about reopening schools. And around the beginning of July, we started to get a little bit of guidance, or we didn't start to get much guidance from either the schools or the state. So parents and teachers started having a lot of questions. And you had teachers like myself who were on the planning committees for the plans of their schools. So some of that information was starting to get out, and it left people in a place where they had a lot of questions and a lot of concerns, and that's why this group grew out of questions and concerns from Rhode Island parents and teachers.
All right, so your use of social media, my audience is well aware that I'm not a big fan of social media on X number of levels. However, it is a great networking tool, and certainly you have you've caught a little fire here. I know you had a rally at the State House a couple of days ago. We covered it there in the news piece. How many folks have actually engaged you on this effort?
Do you mean have like, so we have a petition that we've put out that 1,900 people at this point have signed. We've had a few efforts to attend school committee meetings, send letters to superintendents that have involved a couple hundred people. And then our first car rally that we had on July 30th, I think was the date, we had almost 100 cars show up for our speaking program and car rally. And then this past Friday, we had about 30 people show up in person and 30 people attend the accompanying car rally.
Yeah, well, okay. So, 30 people is not an impressive number unless you think about the virus and the pain in the neck the whole world is right now. It becomes a more impressive number. I think, how many people show up at a rally is less important than the argument that you're trying to make. And, people can sign on to the argument from anywhere at any time. Ashley, you're engaging this group has done, well, we'll talk about the arguments themselves coming up in the next segment, but you're engaging this group has done what for you in terms of processing your, anxiety about all of this?
Well, I got to hear other parents' point of views, teachers' point of views of what they think about their kids going back to school, how safe they think it's going to be. Teachers, saying how safe it's going to be, hearing about the other districts and what they're doing for school, which is helping me to provide advice to my school district when I attend the school board meetings, to when I do public comment, to give advice back to them as a parent and an advocate for them. So basically that's the whole point of the group, and plus the petition and everything, trying to get through to Gina on that, some of the safety points with children and teachers going back to school as well.
Specifically, what did the petition say?
We need to start the year with distance learning, and we're not the only group advocating for that. Some of the teachers unions in the state have also stepped up to say that they would also agree with beginning the year with distance learning. We've also asked for just things to be funded, like unemployment that helps families stay home if their students are doing remote learning, for medical practices that will help bring down numbers in communities. So it's mostly about starting the year with distance learning and making that decision as soon as possible, and then revisiting the decision to open schools really during the height of flu season in like January, so we can see where we are at that point.
Yeah, okay. So we're going to pause here. When we come back, we're going to talk about the irony of all of this, because I have talked, come June, going backwards, you could, any teacher you talk to needed that summer break because they were done. If they did it well, they were done with this distance learning thing. Now, 2 months later, they're advocating for it. We'll talk about the irony of that when we come back on Dan York's State of Mind with Ashley Breault in your top left, a parent in Central Falls, and Stephanie Meuse, a parent in East Providence and a teacher in Central Falls. Be right back. Stay with us, please. Back to my State of Mind. I am Dan York, and Stephanie Meuse has switched positions on the screen. It's like magic. I don't know how that stuff happens. Stephanie is a Central Falls fourth grade elementary charter school teacher and a parent of twins in East Providence. And Ashley Breault is a parent of two little ones in Central Falls. Both have participated in this social media grown RI Parents and Educators for Safe Schools. The argument is for distance learning. The conflict, I guess, is with the governor and her urgency, it seems, to get students into the school buildings, now a couple of weeks postponed into September. We talked about the irony, Stephanie, as a teacher. Listen, I talked to a dozen teachers at least after June was over, some of whom are family members, and they were just like, look, I'm never doing that again. I will never do that again. Well, of course, in the back of your mind is the virus will get better over the summer, blah, 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 right? Well, now it is amazing that the teacher unions are advocating for distance learning to repeat the process. Tell me about the psychology of that. And did you feel the same way, by the way, at the end of the school year?
Absolutely. There's nowhere I would rather teach than inside my classroom with kids in front of me. And I think in my mind, distance learning was the worst thing that could happen, right? I don't think any of us were anticipating facing going back to school in a pandemic without appropriate safeguards or funding, that definitely, for me, falls worse than distance learning. So now distance learning seems like a much more lucrative option than the alternative.
Yeah. Okay. I'm guessing same point of view, Ashley. There's no way that moms and dads wanted to go through this again.
No, I don't want to go through this again. I'd rather have my children in school. They are IEP students, so they need the hands-on, they need the extra services provided to them. Although they have done well with distance learning, many have struggled with distance learning. So there's a combination right there of, a lot of, some students are going to struggle, some students excel from it, but it's best that the teachers be in the classrooms and teach the students. But with the pandemic we're in, there's a lot of safety concerns and reasons why they shouldn't be.
All right, now Stephanie, you were talking about all of the other safeguards, but more the financial instruments, unemployment for parents. It feels, in as much as I'm sure when you had a safety meeting, I'm sure it felt like it was, like a sloppy Joe sandwich. You get this thing tidied up, okay, that'll be safe, but that'll cause this to spill out. So that's a problem. And then we tidy that part, and then it all spills out over here. It just, the whole thing spills out. Well, all of that financial instrumentation you're talking about is also like that. I mean, I don't know that we can get our hands around an economic program with the kind of shortfalls that we're running and confusion over federal and state stimulus and all of that to supply the parents with that kind of economic boost to be able to sit home and manage their kids. I don't know how that's going to happen. So how important to your argument is that stuff? Because I think it's a long shot that we can coordinate all of what you're asking for.
Sure. I don't pretend to have all the answers to that. It's definitely not my area of expertise, but I do know that what schools are being asked to do is financially and logistically impossible. And it's reached a point where the state decision makers just need to admit that it's financially and logistically impossible and explore other alternatives and allow schools to explore and use time and resources to get distance learning back up and running in a way that's better than the emergency distance learning that we did in the spring for our families.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you this. I recently wrote, and it won't appear until later in the week. It was just a blurb thinking about the back to school thing. It seems to me that while I am certain the majority of teachers did their best effort, and I think it was proven when Rhode Island said, look, we're going to try to keep the meter moving, versus Massachusetts, where they said, we're going to just put our fingers in the dike. We're just going to try to stop the bleeding. It seemed like there was a wholesale spirit to core from both teacher unions. The teachers busted their tails trying to get this thing right, and did exceptionally well doing it. But I'm wondering about those handfuls of teachers from school to school that mailed it in. I mean, just mailed it in. And we have too many anecdotal stories from parents to document that did happen. What's your solution to that?
Sure. So I think the solution is making the move as soon as possible for school districts to move to remote learning so that they can actually put appropriate funding, right, to get teachers professional development that they need to make the most of distance learning in the fall, and also so that teachers have time to plan and be supported by the support staff in their buildings. When we were thrown into distance learning in the spring, for many teachers, they were asked to, during their week of vacation time, this was now a week of planning time to get distance learning up and running. And really, I had never used Zoom before, right? There's a huge learning curve with people with no professional development in these things being asked to use them with cohorts of kids that they don't have real time feedback in front of them for how it's going. It's just completely the opposite of what we would ever ask teachers to do in a school building. And I think that as a nation and as a state, especially, we need to extend teachers a lot of grace in that, and also knowing that a lot of our teachers in the state are also parents who were also dealing with either spouses that had lost jobs and were dealing with financial uncertainties, or were dealing with remote learning themselves at home. No one claims that distance learning was perfect in the spring. I don't think many people even claim that it was great. But I do know that if we start putting time and resources into distance learning now, it can be better than it was in the spring, and it's certainly better than returning to school in the conditions that we're being asked to.
Ashley, as a mom, do you feel like every teacher pulled it all out for both your kids?
I do. My daughter's teachers and my son's teachers went above and beyond, especially my daughter's. My daughter's teachers still Zoom with her to this day and help her because she had a horrible time transitioning into a new school in kindergarten. That's why my son's going to stay in the same school that they were both in. So I did have trouble with distance learning with the Zoom meetings and the Google Meets. There was a lot of them. It was cutting in and out a lot of the times. I did have trouble at first, but then I ended up doing it. They ended up learning. They excelled, but I do think there are many more improvements to distance learning, especially that it's going to be part of the school year from now on, for like snow days. Will definitely help out the students and teachers. We definitely need more improvements with that.
Okay, very good. When we come back, one more segment. I've got a layman's theory I'm going to throw out here to see what the reaction is about how distance learning ought to be executed. We have Ashley Breault on the bottom. She's a mom of two in Central Falls, and Stephanie Meuse, who's a mom of two in East Providence and a teacher in Central Falls. Right back on Dan York State of Mind. Stay with us. Right back on My State of Mind. Stephanie Meuse in the top left is a teacher in East Providence, actually a teacher in Central Falls, and a mom in East Providence. And Ashley Breault is a mom in Central Falls. I was thinking that distance learning makes sense, but maybe the teachers ought to go back to the school in the classroom. I know that I've got grandkids in Western Massachusetts that are actually visiting the schools and seeing the classrooms, and then they are going back home for distance learning, and their teachers are going to teach from the schools, reportedly. I think it's a good idea for normalcy for the teachers, and so the kids have an orientation. Stephanie, no, yes, why?
No, I think for two reasons. One, I feel like teachers are perfectly capable of delivering quality instruction from their home. I know because I did it. And secondly, just that teachers are parents and caregivers, and that puts a huge population of students and children in Rhode Island that would need childcare, and that puts us right back disrupting our stable pods. So I think since we have a viable option for people to stay home and teach and learn, then we need to go through with that viable option.
Okay. So what you're telling me is that because you're a mom too, you've got the same challenges that everybody else does.
Sure, except that people with other viable options are staying home, right? So like unless you're a nurse actually dealing like in an emergency room, you are home and you need childcare because you're an essential worker. But like my pediatrician, if you don't have to be in your office right now, you're doing telemedicine. So I think it's appropriate when people have other viable options for us to explore those so that we're not having more people out.
Okay, that's something that we'll explore perhaps as I invite you on the radio on WPRO. We'll talk more about it. You've got some other concerns you wanted to lay out. I have a few minutes here. Lay them out for me real quick, please.
Sure. So I think as a group, we just want to address a few issues with funding, stable pods, and then the safeguards that have been set. There are three of the main things that we bring up to the state and to the governor specifically. So one, her safeguard of 100 cases per 100,000 people being the guardrail for a return. That number has really been disputed. So Dr. Phillips, who's the chief of distance and operational medicine at George Washington University, he's actually argued for 75 cases per 100 people. And then the deputy director of Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, she's gone even to say that it would not be responsible for places with 40, 65, 70, or 100 cases per 100,000 people to open schools, and noted that the schools in Europe that have opened successfully have had one or less case per 100,000 people when reopening. So I think one of our questions for the governor is just how did we arrive at 100 cases per 100,000, and why is our safeguard so much more lax than other places that are opening?
All right. Ashley, you've got a final thought on what you want to see happen here?
Yeah, I do. I think that distance learning should be the start of the school year. I don't believe that it's the solution, and I don't believe it should be for the whole entire school year. Urban communities like Central Falls in my district, we don't have a budget right now because we are state funded. The state hasn't passed the budget. It's kind of hard right now for us to prepare to open these schools safely, number one. Number two, we have 42 teachers laid off and all our nurses are laid off. So that's a big issue. I think that distance learning, like in Central Falls, like the schools should not be open in urban communities that have a high percentage of rate of cases compared to others that have low cases. And as long as the ventilation issues in the schools are met and they're improved and it can be done, I think that schools shouldn't open until that's improved.
So, Steph, a final word from you. The one thing about this is that I'll tell you, the chickens come home to roost. You know, when I first came to Rhode Island 20 years ago, I thought, man, these schools are dilapidated. They're dilapidated. And there are a lot of public schools in America that are dilapidated, but we compete in dilapidation as a coined term. Ventilation systems and all that kind of stuff. That's the Achilles heel of this whole situation, and there's been very little attention to that. You're worried about that, I'm sure, and I think that's a legitimate concern. Final word, we only have a few seconds here.
Sure, I just want to point out that just in Providence Public Schools alone, to fix the ventilation up to safeguard standards, which is changing the air 4 to 6 times per hour, it would cost Providence around $9 million to get those ventilation systems up to standard. And that we haven't invested in schools, and right now schools are already facing a budget cut for our next school year by the state, and that we really need to invest if we're gonna expect our schools to serve our kids.
All right, well, we'll stay in touch with your arguments. I appreciate it. Again, if people want to get in touch with you, it's on the Facebook. What is the Facebook page that you've got going?
You can visit us at www.tinyurl.com/SafeReturnRI, or the Facebook group is Rhode Island Parents and Educators for Safe Schools.
All right, Stephanie Meuse on the top and Ashley Breault on the bottom. Right back for the final word. Stay with us. This is the most complicated question we have faced in a long time. How to educate our kids and safely get them and our educators back in school. It's a fluid matter. Tomorrow night, we will talk to Mary Beth Calabro of the Providence Teachers Union about same. And of course, we'll talk to you on the radio tomorrow at 3 until 6 on WPRO. Good night.